purpose today. We have been building off of everything we've been talking about so far. And we're going to start off with kind of a question. You can either answer this out loud to the group, you can think about it in your head. I would love to hear your answer if you are willing to share, but just going to pose this to the group. When you share your story, what do you hope happens next? A lot of the time, when we're talking about our stories and telling people about our lives, we're sharing just to share. But when we move into purposeful storytelling, this is really the question we want to have in mind. And for those of you who have been thinking about that moment, that story throughout this series, I'm curious if anybody has in mind what kind of purpose or what kind of impact they want to make when they share their story that they'd be willing to share with the group.
I'll jump in and say, I hope I grab their attention.
Mm.
That I say something that grabs their attention and makes them think, and what's she going to say next?
Good answer.
Mhm.
Anybody else who wants to jump in? That's all right. Uh, well, we're going to get right into things today, and I want to take a moment to introduce Megan Kempf, who you guys can probably see on your screen. Megan is a MPS 3 mom who has been gracious enough to accept my offer to speak today. Um, she's going to get to tell you a little bit more about their family, their sweet family, who you can see on your screen here. And Megan is really unique in our storytelling community because she has probably, in the 2 years that I've been a part of the MPS community, one of the most compelling fundraising stories I have ever heard. She and her family have been the quote unquote figureheads of a MPS 3B campaign that raised over $5 million in partnership with our organization and Cure San Filippo in a matter of, I believe it was 36 days. So I'm gonna now hand it over to Megan and let her tell you guys a little bit about her story and how she crafted it specifically to achieve this incredible fundraising goal.
Okay, and can you guys hear me?
Yes,
I think my internet's being funny and I look frozen on my screen, which sorry if I'm frozen on your screen, but if you can
we can
hear me,
see and
that's
hear
all that
you.
matters. Okay, perfect. Okay, well, thank you, Amber, for that introduction. It is um feels very surreal to be here and living this life and having this opportunity. So thanks for giving it to me. And it is challenging because I am an introvert. I do not like being, I don't even want to say the center of attention. I don't like even being like acknowledged. And so that is part of this journey for us was making that transition. And so I'm not a polished public speaker or an expert in any of these things, but I'm happy to share what I have experienced. My name is Megan. My husband, Kyle, and I have two kids, Poppy and Oliver. Poppy is 9 and Oliver is 2. They both have Sanfilippo B. And it's been a long journey for us with Penelope. We know that she has been a special needs kid for a long time. When she was about 3, we started noticing things with her, but it took us until just this last summer to get her diagnosis. So it was a long journey. And I don't want to say we were like a normal family because we were doing a lot of abnormal things. We were really trying to figure out what was best for her. But for all intents and purposes, we were a pretty typical family, and a very private family. So that kind of leans into that. I'm a real introvert. My husband and I are not putting our lives all over the internet. We're really trying to be careful to not put our kids all over the internet. Um, and when we got this diagnosis, we were told there was nothing, that we needed to go home and make memories with our kids. Um, basically that there was a clock ticking and we needed to just make the most of what we had left. And we just weren't gonna sit with that. And I think that's probably true for most people who get this diagnosis. And I know it sounds a little idealistic. I think probably everyone thinks like, we're gonna fight this. And everyone who we met with and kind of had that attitude with gave us a little bit of this pity look like, okay, well, That's kind of how everyone feels. And but we did some digging and relentless digging and decided that we felt like there were going to be some options available to us and that funding was appearing to be a really big obstacle for those options. And we thought, well, getting a diagnosis for your kid with no hope is like an insurmountable problem, but money is not. Money is a problem we can attack. So we immediately thought, well, we're going to have to not be so private anymore. We kind of had this moment of deciding that privacy we felt like had protected our kids up until this point in their lives, and now to protect them, we were going to have to take that veil away and be more public with their story. And that was a real challenge. So when I also want to give kind of a disclaimer because Amber, I know, introduced us as like the figureheads of this, and we were talking about that a little bit because that kind of makes me cringe, not only because I'm an introvert, but also because this was not us. This was a whole team of people. And so there's actually kind of two avenues that I was going to talk about. One is the way we communicated to other families. So we did pursue this path and needed to relay that information to a team of people. We knew that we couldn't do it on our own and shouldn't do it on our own. We knew that there are other families that are in the same position as we are, and we wanted to like share, anything that we could find with those families. And then there's also the communication path that was just ours as a family that was more public facing. And I know like Kathy Linquist is in all of these calls, and their family was another one of these families that joined with us. This was like, we were not the biggest fundraisers and we were not the most public family, um, but it took all of us to do it. And we, I think part of that is that we had a compelling piece of information. The more digging we did, so we did kind of create a public we did our public social media accounts and trying to figure out what do we need to tell there so that we seem genuine and trustworthy. And I don't want to say seem, we are, but we thought for anyone who thinks I want to know more about these people or more about their story, we knew that there needed to be something there that people would relate to and would be clear for people to understand. And so as we were doing that, we were digging more and more into answers, and we did find this pathway with the expanded access program and felt like that was such a compelling story on its own. It was just our job to express it clearly to families that it would be easy for families to rally behind that if we, delivered it in an understandable way. Um, so I think from the personal, like how we decided to tell our story, um, there was some internal tension for me. I'm like beating a dead horse. I'm sorry. I'm a real introvert. And I was watching these giant TikTok moms that are educating people and doing massive fundraising. And I was like, please don't tell me that I have to do this now. And like, what's my niche? How am I going to differentiate myself? I don't want to just like copycat these other moms, but I feel like I need to bring something to the table. And that was a real challenge because um, that idea of finding your voice sometimes is hard when it's more public facing versus just weeding through all the thoughts that are in your mind all the time. Um, and finding the expanded access program really helped me with that because that gave me a lane of information to communicate without feeling like I was having to fit into some kind of a mold. Um, so then I think our biggest rally cry became that it was bigger than us. That was kind of the thing we wanted to be common in all of our communication. We wanted people to feel impassioned that, yes, this is a personal story for us and our kids are on the line, but it's also a lot bigger than us because that's a more compelling perspective we felt like for, especially for people who maybe don't even know us, to know that you're, if you can participate with this, you're going to be something part of something that's bigger than you. Um, Amber brought up this idea of what do I hope happens next? That question. And I would say that is the question that I ask myself every time we're doing any kind of storytelling. And I should pause to say, I'm kind of approaching this idea of storytelling in pieces. Our storytelling has been more in these, through social media, through frequent touches with people, more than a book or something that's a singular story. So I was constantly asking myself this, what do I hope happens next question for every post I make, every video, every phone call that we had. I wanted to have a clear point of what I wanted to happen next, because that was going to help me decide what I needed to say, what I needed to not say, and what I needed to ask of that person. And I think it's easy sometimes. I feel like I'm doing it right now, and I'm really sorry, you guys, because I've had sick kids all week. I haven't practiced this like I would have liked to practice, but it's easy when you have lived this life and you know all of this knowledge to just want to dump it all, or to maybe not understand the way to build it that's going to impact somebody else. And I think a big part of that is streamlining what you're going to say and when you're going to say it. So a lot of times there were things that felt important to say that probably were not, in order to achieve that goal of what do I want this person to do next. So that was a good filter for me. And so then I had 4 questions that I would typically ask myself. They're not really questions, but they're kind of like goals. So first was clarity, and this speaks to that streamlining method of, especially on social media, people get overwhelmed with too much information. I could be conversational. I don't need to like make it so short they don't connect with it, but I need to make sure that what I'm saying is clear, that I'm either giving a story that clearly connects to whatever my call to action is, or that I'm giving facts that are easy to understand. Because if it's not clear, it's not going to resonate with people. So clarity first was always um, where I tried to kind of like hone in what I was trying to say. And then dignity always. And this is kind of twofold. We're trying to build a connection. I feel like if you have that personal connection with someone, you're more likely to be invested in their story or participate with it. But for us, especially, we're not telling our story, we're telling our children's story. And dignity has always been a really primary goal for us because, um, I mean, I think it felt natural. We'd been so private with them for so long that I was cautious of putting them out there and the way that I did it. And I think there's a lot of different ways that we can present our children's story, and it could change for us as life goes on. But I know in the very beginning, my philosophy with especially Poppy is, she has no awareness right now of her condition and her life and how she's appearing to other people. But I remember thinking to myself, I want to make sure that the way I present her and her story is in a way that hopefully years later she could look back at and still feel like she had dignity. And that, I think that helped us. We're Christians, we're very faith-based people, and I think that and our faith really helped us try to make sure that the story we put forward was positive and hopeful. And we're not like ignorant. We know how terrible this disease is, and it is important to communicate that so that people feel the weight of the need. But I think it's important to give people a sense of hope, because that's what's going to help call them to feel like they can help. Um, so clarity, dignity, and then impact. So I wanted to make the impact clear. I wanted people to know if they were to act, what was going to happen, and maybe if you don't act, what is going to happen. I think both of those are equally powerful, and that is, I think, what is going to compel a person to, that pulls them into the story. So you're saying, here's the information you needed to know, here's why you should care about it, but then you need to tell them what's going to happen if they do or don't act, because now they're a character in the story. And then last was the ask, the call to action, or the next step. And so I know that's, when you're doing social media, every post was a different call to action. If you have a larger story you're trying to tell, maybe that looks a little bit different. But for us, I tried to make sure that we had a clear ask, um, like one singular clear ask, and it could be different every time. It might be that we want you to share it and we're going to tell you why we need you to share it. um, because if you share it, you're going to reach people that I can't reach on my own, and it's important that as many people as possible hear this information. Or we are going to ask you to donate, and maybe we're going to ask you to donate a specific dollar amount for a specific reason, and maybe it's small and that's okay, and we're going to tell you why it's okay that it's small, because many people donating small is big. Or maybe we're going to ask for a big number because time is not on our side and we need this big number quickly. And so I feel like just giving, people want to know what they should do. You want them to feel like they're involved, and you want them to know how to act, because the easier it is for them to do it, the more likely they are to. So I think if I could give you a piece of advice, if I could have like a takeaway, it would be to make it easy for people to do the right thing. Um, the purpose of your story and the clarity of your story will help people do that. If you can make it clear what it is, why it matters, why it should matter to them, and what to do about it. That's making it easy for them to do the right thing. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you so much, Megan. Before we move on, does anybody have any questions for Megan? Comments? You did great, by the way. I know you were nervous, but you did great.
Oh, I have a comment if I can jump in.
Yeah.
You know, Megan, first of all, I'm an introvert too, which really amazes me that I'm jumping in here with a comment. But I think the situation pushes us out of that comfort zone pretty quickly, and we just learn to deal with it. But I think as you were telling your story, I think what really grabbed me is how similar your story is to mine. It's as if we're just reading from the same book, reading from the same page. Um, because those of you know, I don't come from the MPS community. I come from the Batten community. And
Mm,
there's 20 years of distance between your story and when I first told my story. My daughter was
yeah,
diagnosed in 2006. So here we
yeah.
are in 2026. And when you tell that story, it's as if you're repeating my words.
Hmm.
And I think that's one of the first things that jumped out to me. And you also were saying, this is not my comfort zone to do this.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
leaned into, I happen to have the older daughter that whom you all met a few weeks ago. And she was an introvert too, but she'd chosen to go into a marketing field where she
Hmm.
had to be pushed out. And I literally wanted to hide behind her because I didn't want to tell the story.
Yeah.
Um, and and I also was so afraid to share Taylor's story because of the dignity. I wanted her to have the most normal life, and I wanted people to see Taylor first.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I just wanted to say so much of what you said resonated with me. And I just want to thank you for jumping out of your comfort zone and not only jumping, but running in the direction that you chose for your children but really for all of our children. For my
Hmm.
children, the community I still connect with, the Batten community, because at the end of the day, every every step of progress informs and leads to progress with other conditions. And so, what you all are achieving for the MPS 3B community, you're achieving it for me too, for a community that I feel very close to, like family. So, I had to jump in and take the few minutes and say thank you for that. And thanks to
Oh,
all of
thank you. That was very kind.
you. Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else before we move on? Well, thank you so much, Megan.
All right, I do
Go
have,
for it.
sorry. Um I just want to commend you for what you did. It was very huge.
Hmm.
Sadie's been diagnosed for almost 10 years now. So we've
Hmm.
had that time to kind of build up a community, and you guys did it, I don't know what you said, like 30 something day. Like
Hmm.
that's remarkable. And it says a lot about you guys. And so yeah, just thank you for doing that and kind of showing us and giving everybody else hope, because I feel like we get in this rut. And I'll be honest, I don't do the social media stuff. We have an Aunt Jessica. She takes care of all that because I
Hmm.
don't know what to do. Um,
Hmm.
and I used to also be an introvert, but doing these things has kind of caused me to switch it a little bit. Like I've gotten
Yes.
more um, open and I like talk to everybody I know now. It's kind of annoying sometimes, but it's um, it kind of does change even that side of
Hmm.
you sometimes. So you could become, I don't know that I would say I'm
Hmm.
an extrovert, but I'm like more of an extroverted introvert or some whatever that
Hmm.
is. So
Hmm.
and I think doing these things has caused that and or helped that, not caused it.
Hmm.
It's a good thing. Because I am more likely to speak up and not be afraid
Hmm.
and do all the things that I need to do like you guys did. But good job. Like y'all did an amazing, yeah, it's amazing what you did.
Well, thank you. And I did not mention this in my little presentation, but I think one thing that, you know, was hard for us to even, like, it's been hard for people to understand even is that, we did this big amount of fundraising and there's no certainty that our kids will even get treated. I mean, it was definitely, that is the goal, is that we wanted to find answers for our kids, and that's still our goal. But it was a bigger story to us that there just needed to be options for families and for kids. And it was hard sometimes for people to understand, that but what about, like, but your kids are going to get in, right? And we've had to express that we don't know and we're hoping. Um, but I just want to say that because it is a much bigger journey. And I think we all are a part of this community together and pulling together. And it was a short period of time and it was fresh after diagnosis for us, but all these other families, we couldn't have done it without all these other families, and it was not new to everyone. So I think community was just a really important part of that story, and it's been really important to us to emphasize that for multiple reasons.
Awesome. Great. Well, with that, we're going to move on, just so we can have some time. But again, thank you, Megan, for sharing Poppy and Oliver with us, for telling us about your journey. As you can hear from the group, it means a lot to see other families in this space moving in ways that are impactful. I also saw Katie mention in the comment and heard from multiple people this topic of dignity. We touched really lightly on this in the very first episode about being ethical with our storytelling, but I think it's worth bringing it forward again as we look at telling our stories with purpose. We always want to be mindful and intentional with what we're sharing. Like Megan said, she wants Poppy to be able to look back in the future and think, my mom told my story in a way, my dad told my story in a way, the community shared my story in a way that still made me feel empowered and in charge of my own life. So that's really something to think about and carry with you. If you think to yourself, I wouldn't want somebody to share this about me or my life, you probably shouldn't be sharing it. So just something to think about as we look at the lenses of storytelling for purpose.
Mhm. Can I
Yes,
say one thing?
go for it.
So I have my two girls are 21 and 18, and my oldest, Margaret, who's the smaller one in all our pictures, is very private. And she's like, "Why are you telling everyone? Why did you buy that magnet for the car? Like, people are gonna see it." And then I have Bridget, who's doing TikToks about Sanfilippo syndrome. And it's like they both understand what's going on. So I have to be like really careful what I say in front of them. Even just being on the Zoom, I have to make sure Bridget's in her room and she's got her TV on or something. Margaret's out of the house. It's like I don't know which way to go. I unfriended Margaret on social media so she can't see all the comments and questions. She doesn't even know I did that. I guess she'll at some point realize that, but I find it tricky. So
Yeah.
Bridget did the podcast with iHeartRadio, but Margaret did
Mhm.
not, and that raised a lot of questions, like where is Margaret? How come she's not
Mhm.
doing it?
Yeah. And that's a difficult line to walk. And I think the best way we can approach situations like that is just tell people she's not comfortable sharing her story publicly yet, and we
Yeah,
have to leave that up to her. I think, that gives her ownership of her own story in a way that we want to make sure that she still feels strongly that it is, because it is her story, it's nobody else's.
yeah,
And as much as we may want to raise awareness, we need to lean into those who are willing to step into the light and respect those who may not be ready for that yet.
yeah. They're both coming with me to the World Symposium.
Oh,
Yeah,
wonderful.
Megan knows I'm having breakfast with Kyle, I think one day. But I'm nervous,
Yes.
what they might hear.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
and
I wish
sorry
you.
I'm late on here too, and that
Oh.
I'm off camera. I got I had another Sanfilippo family conversation, but
Uh,
I wanted to just also acknowledge too, Kathy, that I think um, you have another added challenge
hmm.
in that people in general don't understand. They don't necessarily understand Sanfilippo, but they certainly don't understand attenuated versions. And
Right,
so anything that your girls go and Google and read sound really awful, but they also don't really align with their experiences in so many cases. So any conversations that we have with families um, who have either children or adults with attenuated forms of these conditions, there's that element too, that it just seems like everything you read and everything you hear doesn't match. And
right.
that's really hard for a lot of our patients themselves too.
Yeah, Bridget follows a lot of the other parents. So
Right.
she'll be like, "Oh,
Right.
Ma, Sadie this," or, she'll tell me things. I'm like, "Right, right." Um, and she'll say to me, like, "What does dementia mean again?" Like they keep talking about dementia. So
Hmm.
Bridget's definitely like aware. But their genetic doctor did do a good job explaining to them, like even Margaret and Bridget are very different on this journey, that, it affects everyone differently. It's like a big wide range.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I'm always like nervous what they might hear. But they're 18 and 21, they are adults and they want to come, they want to learn. So,
Yeah. Well, and the in most compelling piece for you individually, like Leslie said, is you can ask your daughters, what are you comfortable with me sharing? What are you not?
right,
For a lot of our San Filippo community, that's not the case.
right,
But when that is, I think that's always the best rule of thumb is just ask, hey, how much are you willing and comfortable for me to share? What would you
right.
like to share on your own? And just move through that space that way.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Awesome. So we're going to move into our slides for today. We're going to look at storytelling through primarily three lenses that are the most applicable to our community. And that is going to be fundraising, as we've just gone over, advocacy, and awareness. Of course, there are different purposes for telling stories, but in our community, these are the three most common that we see. So, in terms of storytelling for fundraising, and for all of our purposes for storytelling, you'll notice a couple of very similar themes running throughout all of them, but sometimes it's easiest to have some framing questions or some notes to really consider when you're developing your story. So that's what I've broken out here, as well as the worksheets that you guys received prior to this call. There's this individual worksheet for each of the purposes of storytelling. So whatever direction you want to take your story, I encourage you to look at that worksheet to help you really think through the different elements of your story. So for fundraising, we've got four primary elements, and I think Megan did a really good job of touching on all of these, starting with clearly identifying the need. Obviously, we've got Poppy and Oliver, which is such a great picture of them. In their case, we now have a rare disease diagnosis, MPS 3B, and so there's a need here. There's no cure, there's no approved therapy on the market at this point, so we know what our need is. We make it personal. This isn't just a nebulous community that needs support. When Megan and her husband and any of their community are talking to people, they're not talking about the MPS 3B community. They're talking about Poppy and they're talking about Oliver. And that makes a difference. It's really hard for people when you tell them, oh, well, when you donate, you support the community. That feels really nebulous. It feels hard to grasp. It feels hard to change. But when you say, if you donate, you're going to give an opportunity for Poppy, or I see Oliver on the screen, Are providing an opportunity for Poppy and Oliver and other children like them to potentially have access to a clinical trial. That makes a difference. The donor knows tangibly what they can do, which bleeds right into identifying the potential impact of a gift. You want to be really clear here. Like I said, you don't want to say, oh, well, when you give, it makes a difference. Of course, it makes a difference. We know it makes a difference. But how? In this case, we're making sure that there's an expanded access trial here. We're giving opportunities to kids that they might not otherwise have. And lastly, you want to ask really directly for what you need. I know that that's really uncomfortable for a lot of people. Those on the call who know Terry Klein, who is our CEO, she will tell you, I love asking for money, but she is rare. She is very rare. It's not comfortable for us to ask people for what we need sometimes. But when you're fundraising, you have to be clear. You need to outline very explicitly, hey, I need $100 to meet my goal to make sure that I can provide gas money for a family in Alaska to make it to an appointment on time. Or I just need $5. It'll make all the difference for a family who just needs some lunch money to make it to the end of the day. You want to be really, really direct with that. And then lastly, I provided resources throughout all of these slides. These are society-specific resources, obviously, since that's us who's leading the call. We do have a fundraising committee, and this is a group that meets once a month. They go over different fundraising initiatives at the society and they hear ideas on new ones. If you want to get more involved, I highly recommend this. You can reach out to me. I'm happy to get you in connection with our committee chair. But this is a great resource. And lastly, my favorite tip for storytelling for fundraising is, and Megan said this, don't overwhelm people with details. Because when you do, you lose the why. You lose the core root of the ask. And that's obviously why we're here when we're doing fundraising asks. So before we move on, does anybody have any questions? Okay. Next, we're going to look at storytelling for advocacy. This is one of our more popular storytelling methods. I see a lot of people who come to us and are looking to make a change. And so they come to us and ask, how can I do that? And one of the best ways that you can advocate is sharing your story in a very intentional and meaningful way. Like fundraising, there's 4 key elements, some that are very similar, but need to be framed a little bit differently, starting with clearly communicating the need. Why is it worth advocating? What are we advocating for? Secondly is identifying the opportunity. A lot of the time, if we're advocating with our story, it's because there's an opportunity that needs addressment. You've seen us sharing on our channels a lot about the Give Kids a Chance Act, about the PRV reauthorization. These are things you've seen a lot from the society, and we're usually advocating for them because there's opportunity to make a significant change. Likewise, you need to provide opportunities for action. For advocacy, this is one of the easiest ones that you can provide opportunities for action. Typically, you can give a direct link to a senator or a representative search where people can identify who they need to reach out to. A lot of the times, partner organizations like Project Alive, like Every Life Foundation for Rare Diseases, they put out action alerts. We send out action alerts where you can just click a button and send a message to your legislators telling them I support or I reject whatever piece of legislation is in action. So we want to make sure that we're providing those when we're telling these stories. And last but not least, you want to make the consequences clear. You want to let people know if you don't support this particular piece of legislation, this action, here's what will happen, or here's what won't happen, which could be worse. And like with fundraising, we have an advocacy committee. We meet bi-monthly as a large group, and we meet monthly in small individual work groups. I know some of the people on this call are at those meetings already, but for those who aren't, I highly encourage you to join. We tackle anything from special initiatives and projects to state advocacy and federal advocacy. So that's a great way to get involved with advocacy storytelling. And a good tip for advocacy storytelling is be prepared to tell your stories quickly. The average meeting with a legislative official or with their staffers is 15 to 30 minutes. And we want to make sure that there's time to ask questions, share additional details, make requests. So I recommend that you practice, but don't perfect, telling your story in 3 to 5 minutes if you ever want to go to the Hill and make those kinds of visits. Any questions on advocacy? Awesome. I have a great example here for advocacy. This is Benjamin, who is, as you can tell, super cute. Benjamin's parents worked with us on an advocacy piece last year celebrating Newborn Screening Month. Their son Ben, as you can read here, he has MPS 2, and he was diagnosed because there was a pilot study done for newborn screening for his condition in North Carolina. Because of his diagnosis, North Carolina has now adopted newborn screening for children with MPS 2. So his family was willing to step forward and share their story and share the critical importance of newborn screening and call for better newborn screening across the nation because they were one great example of where newborn screening changed the course of Ben's life and his family's life because he got earlier access to care than he would have otherwise. The full article is linked here. I encourage you to read it. It's a great example of storytelling for advocacy. And he's just a super cute kid with a great story. So I highly recommend it. Our last outlet is storytelling for awareness. This one we see a lot. This is what you see mostly on social media. You see people sharing this on personal channels, professional channels. This is how we make people aware of a cause or a crisis that means something to us. And that's how we start when we're developing these kinds of stories. You want to identify a cause. Sometimes it's not a cause, sometimes it's a crisis or something that needs immediate attention. Then you want to move into imparting knowledge. Much like with advocacy, we don't want to overwhelm people. Since we're talking specifically with the MPS community here, we don't want to give them deep statistics on MPS because they'll probably start to glaze over and they're not going to keep that in their heads. It's better if we just say MPS is an ultra rare disease. It has no known cure, and it is ultimately fatal for children and adults who have it. Here is how it relates to me. Either I have a loved one with MPS. The MPS community, in my case, it's relatable because the research that's being conducted in the MPS community could ultimately lead to research that could one day cure my mother who has multiple sclerosis. It doesn't have to be personally relatable. It just needs to be relatable in a way that endears the subject to the story that you're telling. You don't want somebody to walk away going, why did I hear this? What does this matter to me? You want to give them something that makes them think, huh, I may not have a first degree of connection to MPS, but I think that this is an important cause for me to champion. Lastly, you want to provide tools to help. Just like with fundraising, when we want a clear call to action, we don't want somebody to walk away from an awareness story solely just thinking, okay, well, now I know MPS is a thing. I know it exists. We want them to walk away knowing, okay, by sharing MPS stories, by following MPS content creators, by doing, whatever the case, we want to give them an opportunity to engage back with us so that we're moving them out of that awareness space and into advocacy or fundraising or just general support. We want to give them an opportunity to reach back out. And then, as you can tell by this lovely picture here, which is a submission from our MPS Awareness Day campaign last year, awareness doesn't have to be serious. It's one of the more fun forms of storytelling because it can be fun. It can look like putting on neon ribbons and sharing photos on social media just to bring awareness, to make people aware and drive them deeper into our community. So I highly encourage you to get creative with your awareness stories. And we have a great example here. So this guy that you see in the corner of the photo, that is Hendrix, who has MPS 2. His mom gave me permission to share this, which is their MPS Awareness Day submission. And she did, I think, a really great job in her social media caption, which you can read in full here, of explaining very succinctly what MPS 2 is, Hendrix's journey in particular, and then explaining why it should matter to people and how they are continuing on with their lives and building forward despite this diagnosis. They're keeping it hopeful, which I think Megan mentioned that earlier. That's a really important part of storytelling in our community. We talk about a really heavy subject, and sometimes that can bog us down, but we don't want it to. We want to keep it hopeful. We want people to feel like they can make an impact or they can make a change. Any questions on awareness? Okay. The last thing I want you guys to go off with this week is with this question. I know I've asked two, but I like this one a lot too. How can your story change the world? Even if it doesn't meet one of these purposes, even if you just feel like it's really important to share this, how can your story change the world or your world? It doesn't have to be the world at large, it can just be your world. How can you open this up and open your life up in a way that feels meaningful and invites others in to your journey to support you, to walk alongside you, whatever that looks like? I highly encourage you guys to sit with this over the next week. Next week, we're moving into our final episode of this series, and that is episode 4, which is putting it all together. That episode is going to be a little bit different than what we've been doing so far. It will not be recorded, for starters. Secondly, you're going to hear a lot less from me, and I'm going to hear a lot more from you guys. This is kind of a story slam, poetry slam style meeting where I'm going to encourage you guys to come with your draft of the story, the moment that you guys have been sitting with for the last couple of weeks. And I would like for you to share it with the group. This is an opportunity for feedback. This is an opportunity for connection. And I really, really encourage you guys to be there. I think it's going to be great. And I'm really excited about it. But unless there's any questions, that's all I've got for you guys today.